Hi, I'm Chris Howard. I'm with Maine Cooperative Extension, and I'm here today at Snell Family Farm to talk to John Snell about his apple crop and purchasing crop insurance.
Yeah, I'm John Snell. My wife and I farm here. We farmed for about 50 years, but the farm was originally started by my grandparents in 26. But then my father farmed here. We were married in 75, and at that point we shifted the focus, or tried to, from wholesale to retail. And that basically is why the farm is still here, I would say. We raise apples. We have about 7 acres of apples. We raise about 8 acres of mixed vegetables. And we do probably a half an acre of covered greenhouse crops. And we do inside tomatoes, hoop house tomatoes as well. But all of those crops are sold retail, either here at the farm or at Farmers Market in Portland. And Ramona also sells to some of the restaurants in Portland. But the focus is predominantly retail, where we're raising smaller amounts, but trying to have a larger margin by doing both of the jobs, both raising it and marketing it. When you're farming, you're always dealing with those problems of risk. That's pretty much what farming is try to mitigate the things that you discover after you've farmed long enough that can go wrong. You try to develop strategies, a plan A, B, C, D, and E, because things do go wrong, and you try to manage that as best you can, or you think you're managing it. And so you have backups of various things. In our greenhouses, we heat with 2 sources of heat. They're heated with propane, but they're also heated with oil. And whichever fuel is cheaper at the time is the one you set the thermostat for. And then you set the other one about 10 degrees lower. So if something happens, that heat goes off, the other one will come on. And there's also a generator that will come on if the power goes off. A crop in the greenhouse, when it's really cold, does not survive very long without heat. Yeah. So, but that's just a way of managing that particular risk. Apples are a particularly risky crop. From my grandfather's point of view, the laying hens, the eggs were very predictable. You could predict how many you were going to produce, when they were going to produce them, what they were going to sell for. That was very predictable. Apples, it was always up and down, and you could have a huge crop and not get much money for it, or you could have a short crop, and if everybody had a short crop, you might do quite well. But the two things were different, and so they always saw the apples as a very risky crop, and they used to buy crop insurance. Back then, it was mostly for hail. It wasn't for all perils. It was strictly hail insurance back then. Ramona and I switched mostly because of climate change. With warming springs, you ended up with problems at blossom time, where the blossoms would be vulnerable to frost earlier in the season than you had ever seen it before. And I think it was 2012, we had a freeze and there were no apples out there. Particularly with climate change, buying crop insurance seemed to be a pretty good hedge, I would guess you would say. Also, it's subsidized because it's all peril. So you're not truly paying the full cost of what it covers. If you were, then it wouldn't necessarily make sense. And from an apple point of view, the coverage of the crop insurance, the way we look at it, since we're a small producer, if we had a crop failure, we could take the money that we were going to get paid in the insurance and buy apples from another producer, larger producer, who had a crop, and then resell those apples that way and recoup your cost. And it would cover, it would be really no different than the cost of raising that crop and then selling it. You use the insurance to buy in the replacements and then sell them and make money on the margin. And also you would hold on to your customers and keep the business going as a going concern. It's a real problem when you have an interruption, because suddenly your customers have to look around and find what they would have been buying from you, which they'll find, but then you got to get them to come back to you. Anything that can help keep your system going is a good thing, and any source of capital improvements is a good thing. I mean, money for capital improvements is always scarce, and anything that can be leveraged in crop insurance, you're leveraging with the subsidy on the insurance. You're managing the risk. You could not afford it if you were paying for all of the perils that are covered there. It would just be too high. You would have to self-insure for that. But you try to manage things as best you can. Anything that can improve the farm or any capital improvements is good. So you're best to leverage all of the help that you can get, from the extension folks, from farm service. You actually can leverage it through the income taxes, through accelerated depreciation. The government's willing to subsidize your business as long as you're buying equipment in lieu of paying some taxes, and that's an indirect subsidy. For vegetables, it's redundant equipment. So you have many different tractors that can do many different things. And if something's broken down, you can hook and unhook and switch. Yeah. But most problems that we've noticed over all these years, we've tried to come up with a strategy for. We've had 2 greenhouses collapse in the snow, and we put up props on some. There's a lot that we've taken the plastic off for the winter. We bought a tractor with a cab on it and a snowblower to get the snow away from the sides so it doesn't build up as bad. But there were 2 that have collapsed, and then we rebuilt them. But that's the type of stuff that you tend to remember that.
Makes an impression.
And you try to come up with a strategy to, you can't come at the end of the year and write like the seed catalogs do and just write crop failure and be in business the next year afterwards. You have to do what it takes to come up with the crop, and it's not always picture perfect.
University of Maine Cooperative Extension is an equal opportunity institution and provider committed to non-discrimination. For more information, visit extension.umaine.edu/non-discrimination.